But I'm thrilled to introduce today's keynote speaker, Kent Hance. He's a good friend of mine and one of my mentors. And he's a great Texan, he's a fine American. Kent Hance's accomplishments are legendary. He's a former U.S. Congressman, former Texas State Senator. He was chair of the Texas Railroad Commission. And he was the former chancellor, is the former chancellor of Texas Tech. And I would say that he's the most impactful leader in the history of Texas Tech. And, and I hope you've subscribed to his podcast, Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas. It is a great podcast. I've heard a lot of those stories through the years, and I love to listen to them. And he... Anyway, do yourself a favor and subscribe to that podcast. You'll enjoy it very much, and you'll enjoy him this morning. So please welcome the Honorable Kent Hance.
Thank you. Thank you to Ron Butler and First Financial and Scott Deezer, and that's a good organization, and I enjoy doing business with them. I hadn't done 1,000 projects with them, though. They might not have introduced me if I'd done 1,000 projects with them. I'm just going to kind of visit the. I was a home builder at one time in the 70s. I was state senator and a practicing attorney, and I guess I thought I didn't have enough to do, and I was busy. And so I started a little home building business, and somebody asked me one time, did you make any money in the home building business? I did. I made a lot of money because as a lawyer, I got first dabs on the DWIs that my subs got. That's how I made money, helped my law business. And I got elected to Congress, still had the home building business, and sold it. And Jimmy Carter got elected, and interest rates went to 17, 18%. Of course, the poor guy that bought me out, he didn't last long. It was a bad time. I don't know why, but I think of that period of time with Carter during a lot of the things that happen now. It's kind of amateur hour, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but that's the way I feel about it. They asked me to talk to you, and I have just Google or Spotify or iHeart, any of them, Kent Hance, best storyteller in Texas. We've done them, a lot of them. We've been doing them for over a year. In March, the last time I looked, we had 39,000 people hit and listened in March. And it'll show you the countries and show you the cities. Houston's number 1, Dallas 2, Austin 3, Lubbock 4, because, I'm from Lubbock. But the Islamic Republic of Iran had 9 people listening to my podcast. And my wife thought that maybe they were been sentenced to prison and they were putting some cruel and unusual punishment on them, made them listen. And there were like 15 people in Belgium, and so many people in Germany. There were in countries where there's, in Libya or Algeria or in Southeast Asia, where there's oil and gas exploration, the numbers would go up. But some of these stories, if you go back and listen, I do them on Mondays, but there's a library and you can go back and listen to all of them. But on Mondays, and they're about 15 to 20 minutes. Some people have a podcast that'll go an hour. Most people are going to be at work by, not take an hour to drive, but it allows you to kind of relax. And I want to share a little this morning about some of the colorful people I've met along the way. And I picked out 3. One was State Senator Babe Swartz from Galveston. Swartz and I rarely ever voted the same way. He was liberal, I was conservative, but he was a colorful guy and kind of fun to be around. This story is he was a young district attorney, assistant district attorney. He's 27, and he went down to the sheriff's office one day, went running to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff said, Schwartz came in and said, I got to have a gun, I got to have a gun. And he said, why do you need a gun? He said, look at this letter. And he got a letter. It's real short, to the point. It said, Dear Mr. Schwartz, I'm going to kill you. It wasn't signed. And sheriff looked at it and he said, they're just trying to scare you. He said, they're doing a good job. I got to get a gun. The sheriff said, you don't need a gun. You shoot the wrong person. You shoot yourself. Finally, the sheriff gave in and said, okay, go to the pawn shop across from the courthouse and get a .38 police special, Smith & Wesson. And, and this is good advice. If you got an amateur who's going to get a gun, make sure they get a revolver. But automatic will jam on them or they won't know how to operate. A revolver, all you got to do on a revolver is point and pull. So he told him, point and pull. He said, now, once you get the gun, go down to Billy's welding shop on the east end and have them file the gun sight off. And so I said, well, what's that? He said, it looks like a little BB. It's on the end of the barrel. That's what you sight it with. And he said, well, why do I have them file that off? He said, that way when they take it away from you and stick it up your rear, it won't hurt so bad. I always like that. Schwartz looked at him and said, are you saying I don't need a gun? Yeah, I'm saying you don't need a gun. Schwartz, we served with a guy named Ralph Hall that was from this area. And anybody from Rockwall or know Ralph Hall? Wasn't he great? One of the best of all time. And Ralph was a colorful guy, and you could not say something that he could sidestep you. Just keep, nothing. So he was good on his feet. We flew back. I was in Congress representing Lubbock. He was representing Rockwall in East Texas. And we got off the plane at DFW, and I was going to have to go catch another plane to get to Lubbock, and he was through. And we're walking down the concourse, and somebody said, Congressman, Congressman. And we turned around, and I didn't know the guy. And Ralph went over and gave him a slap on the back and hugged him and introduced me to him. And he said, this is Congressman Hance from Lubbock. And he said, this guy lived next door to me in Rockwall for a long time. And he said, he'd been gone 10 years or so. And the guy said 12. And Ralph was talking along, and all of a sudden Ralph stopped, and he said, I forgot to ask, how's that beautiful, charming, vivacious, cute, intelligent little bride of yours? And so, well, I said, I divorced her about 6 months ago. Ralph said, you better off without her. Just slapped him on the back. Never missed a beat. Is that good or what? I'm over there biting my tongue, just thinking, God almighty, and the guy walked up, and I said, Ralph, you used every adjective known to mankind to describe her, and then he said, well, I need to make him feel good. It did not faze him. And he could recover for anything. He was the best. The other person I want to mention that was unusual, and do I have any builders from the Permian Basin? They probably stayed out late last night. Not. One time, I spoke to the Desk and Derrick Bosses Night in Midland, Odessa, and they had like 1,000 people there. And I knew it was going to be a fun group. It said cocktails, 5 until 8. Boy, I'm telling you, they were loose. I got up there and said, hello, and they just laughed, they were. And they got ready for the program, and they were really loud. And a woman got up to give the prayer, the opening prayer, and she had on half glasses, half-rimmed glasses. And so she read the prayer, and she had her head kind of back like that, and she was praying, and it was noisy. And somebody at the back said, "Honey, we can't hear you back here." And somebody at the front yelled back and said, "She's praying." The guy at the back yelled, "Say, hell, we still can't hear her." And she really was good, not as good as Ralph Hall, but she's good. And she said, and Lord, do something about the drunks in the back. Just quiet them down, son, quiet them down. But Midland and Odessa, when I was a state senator, I represented Odessa, but not Midland. And you never wanted to represent Midland and Odessa. You wanted to represent Midland or Odessa. But if one of them got a post office, the other one had to have a post office. And if one of them got a new such building, there's a lot of competition out there. And they had established the University of Texas at the Permian Basin. And when they did, the fight was on who could get it, Midland or Odessa. And so I was representing Odessa, and I told the guys that were trying, I said, this committee, you've got Oscar Mousy as vice chairman and Babe Schwartz as chairman. You got a couple of liberals on there, and you got to have somebody that's pretty hardcore liberal to testify, try to get those 2 votes. And I was trying, politics is a business, and I'll get to that in a minute, but we had to have, I think there were 9 on the committee, we had to have 5 votes. And so they said, we got a guy named Warren Burnett, and he was a litigator, trial lawyer, good. He'd been district attorney at one time. Had a gravelly voice. Juries loved him. And Warren Burnett was president of the ACLU. That's pretty liberal. And so they said, we'll get him to come testify. And I said, well, Warren was known to have a liquid lunch on occasions. And he was really in the fast lane after about 2 o'clock. And so I thought, well, I'll use my friends there, and we'll get that in the morning. So I had Schwartz set the committee meeting at 10 in the morning. And it's 10 in the morning, and that way, it'd be okay. Wouldn't have that liquid lunch. He got there, and I got over and, said, be sure, and I outlined what he needed to say and everything. And they got a bunch of witnesses going from some other towns, and they didn't get to him. And they had a lunch break. I was worried. He came back about 1:30. I went over and gave him a hug. And he'd had a drink or 2. I said, Warren, don't say anything controversial. Just tell him we need, okay, hell, I know what I'm doing. You think I didn't win all those cases on knowing how to, there's nothing more than a jury. Okay. He got up there and did a masterful job. And then Senator Schwartz asked him a question. He said, Mr. Burnett, do you think there's a need for a 4-year college in Odessa, Texas? And Warren said, Mr. Chairman, there's enough ignorance in Odessa to justify an 8-year college. I'm telling you, the Chamber of Commerce director, I thought he was going to die of a heart attack. To the day he died, anytime I saw him, he'd say, "You never got that school if it hadn't been for me." And he was a colorful guy. But I want to talk to you a little about politics, how it's changed. When I was in Congress in the 70s and 80s, if somebody came up to me and said, "Who do you hate?" I don't hate anybody. If you ask now a member of Congress, "Who do you hate?" you got to pull up a chair. It's going to take a while. President Reagan, I loved Reagan. He was the best. He was the best. And the press tried to portray him as he just some actor that didn't know anything. He was the best I've ever seen at cutting a deal. See, a lot of people don't understand about politics. They think the decisions are made by people that get on CNN and Fox. Those are not the ones, they can get on and talk and everything. But you got workhorses and show horses. And the show horses don't, they're not the ones making the deals. I carried Reagan's tax cut. Phil Graham carried the budget cuts. And at that time, we were conservative Democrats, boll weevil Democrats, and Reagan had to have some Democrats that would carry his bill so he'd get Democrats to vote for it. We had 78 Democrats vote for Reagan's tax cut. You couldn't get one in this day and time. But Jimmy Baker was Secretary of State under Bush later, but he was Chief of Staff for Reagan. And he called me and he said, the president wants to get some of the conservative Democrats up here at a group of 5 to 10 at a time so he can work on them and wants you to bring them up since you're carrying the bill. And so I got together and made a list with Baker of who we wanted. In the first group, I took 7 up. And we go in, and President Reagan came in, and he was great. One-on-one. He made you feel like there might be somebody that he thought more of in the world, but you wouldn't figure out who it was. He was just charming. And so we got started the meeting, and he looked over, and there was Congressman Billy Tozan from Louisiana and Congressman John Breaux from Louisiana. And he said, guys, I got 72% of the vote in Louisiana. Y'all got to be from a tax cut. And Breaux said, well, we'd like to. But you're going to lift the sugar import quotas, and that's going to kill our sugar cane farmers, and we can't vote for it. And Reagan said, well, what if I don't lift those? Breaux said, yeah, we'd vote for it. And Reagan just grabbed his hand and shook it, and he said, you got a deal. Well, look, the tax cut affected everyone in the nation, the largest tax cut in the history of the country. The sugar deal was a fight between the soda pop people and the sugar farmers. It was important, but look, it was very small in the big picture. So he picked up 2 votes just like that. And then, he understood what the deal was. And then they had several others, and out of the 7 we invited, 6 of them agreed to support the tax bill, the tax cut bill. And so they asked me to take them out on the West Portico and have a press conference. And the West Portico press is always out there circling, and they tell them there's going to be a press conference in 30 minutes. And so I go out, and by the way, 6 out of the 7 committed. The other person that didn't commit had to go out the back door. You get better treatment. And so I go out and I say, on behalf of President Reagan, I want to announce that we picked up 6 more Democrats to vote for Reagan's tax cut. And I talked about it, and then I introduced each one, and then I said, are there any questions? And Sam Donaldson with ABC, y'all remember him? Sam was just meaner than a junkyard dog. And Sam immediately, the press, if you vote for a tax cut, the press is always going to ask this question, why are you giving a tax cut to these rich people? And the tax cut was across the board. You got a 25% tax cut You know, if you were paying $100,000 in taxes, you got $25,000. If you were paying $1,000, you got $250. It was fair. Anyway, Sam Donaldson said, Congressman, talking to Bro, Congressman Bro, why are you voting for this tax cut for rich people, this Republican tax cut for rich people? You know, and I knew that Bro would say, because it's good for the economy, it's good for the public, everything. He said, because the president promised that he wouldn't lift those sugar quotas and kill my sugar cane farmers. I thought I wouldn't have said that, but, you know, that's okay. And Donaldson said, Congressman, did you sell your vote? And Bro said, nope, I just rented it out for a while. And I thought, his career is over. I didn't know Louisiana politics. He went on to get elected 3 terms in the U.S. Senate. You know, people in Louisiana said, hey, he didn't sell it, he just rented it out a while. They were proud of it. A lot of people, you know, politics is a business. You got to be able to get elected and you got to be able to serve. There are some people that can do both. That's a small group. There's some people that are really good at campaigning, but they're not good at serving. Jimmy Carter was a great campaigner, but it is getting things done and getting it operating. He just wasn't. Bill Clinton was pretty smooth. Bill Clinton was, I would say he was even smoother than Reagan when it came to meeting people and tell them what he felt like he needed to tell them. You could be at the White House and somebody be going through the line and say, Mr. President, that banking bill that passed is terrible. And Clinton go, oh, I know. I cringed when I read it. And they go on. About 3 lines, the guy come by and say, Mr. President, I sure hope you sign that banking bill, boy, it's needed. Oh, I understand that. He was, John McCain and I were at a conference one time, and Clinton introduced him, and McCain said, he lied about me, but he's so good, he said, I enjoyed it. He said, it just made me feel good. Clinton was a liberal, moderate to liberal Democrat. He wasn't a progressive. Clinton would not fit in with this White House. You know, it's different. It's moved to the left. I think that, the important thing for you to do is to know your member of Congress, your state senator, your state representative. No matter where you live, you have a state representative, a state senator, and a U.S. congressman, and 2 U.S. senators. And you want to know them. You want to participate. When they have a fundraiser, go. You don't have to give a maximum amount or anything. They'll have some fundraiser you can get in for $100. And help them in their campaigns. Let them know you. Try to show them your business sometime. I mean, they're busy. But if they know you, it's going to be easier for you to explain what's going on. And they want to have that input. So it's very important. And there are people that, I'll tell you, one of the best was Charlie Wilson. Charlie Wilson could put deals together. Charlie Wilson and I put a deal together with the Michigan delegation on the bailout of Chrysler. And we got the Texas people to vote for that in exchange for the Michigan people to vote to abolish the windfall profits tax, which was a terrible tax on the state of Texas. The windfall profits tax, a lot of people don't understand this. that was a tax on oil produced in the United States. If you produced it in Venezuela or Saudi Arabia, you didn't have to pay the tax. Now, that's crazy. It's a reverse tariff. Most people put tariffs on goods coming in, but that one was one where they put it on American citizens. But if you're from Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Indonesia, didn't have to pay it. And I've never, in the public, you'd tell them that, and they'd go, well, that's hard to believe. I say, especially if you're in the oil business in Texas. But we did that deal, and here's the thing. Lee Iacocca came by and met with me and met with Charlie. Lee Iacocca was CEO of Chrysler. He was good, and I knew that he was going to get it turned around. If we didn't turn it around, unemployment benefits, food, it's going to cost a lot of money. And the government, we made an investment in it, and 3 years later, they paid it back and paid $265 million that we made. The government made that. One of the few times we ever made money on anything. But it was a deal that made sense. And too many times the emotions make it difficult to get things done. People get real emotional on something. Wilson, did any one of you read the book, Charlie Wilson's War, or see the movie? You need to go back, and it was a great movie. And Tom Hanks played Charlie, and Charlie said, they should have gotten somebody a little more handsome. Charlie, have you looked in the mirror? But Charlie Wilson always had a few girlfriends, and some of them would be in their 20s. Those were the old ones. And he was known to have a drink. And one time he tried to take Miss March of Playboy magazine on a congressional junket with him. He said it'll help the morale of the troops. And Navy wouldn't do it, and he cut their budget next time. Charlie played hardball. But in that movie, you just see how the Russians lost in Afghanistan because of Charlie Wilson. And Charlie told everybody, he said, you've got to have somebody in Afghanistan or the crazy, crazy people, terrorists will take over. And the United States wanted to get out, and they just got out. And just, we didn't follow through, which later became the second time we just got out. Some of my friends that are more libertarian, they talk about U.S. shouldn't ever have troops anywhere. What about Germany, Japan, and South Korea, three of our greatest allies, and we still have troops there? And they set up democracies. So I'm not saying we have troops everywhere, but you have to look at those things. And that's, that's very important. Texas delegation, you've got some people that are in position. If the Republicans take control, the chairman of appropriations will probably be Kay Granger from Fort Worth. It's a powerful position, powerful position. The chairman of the Armed Services Appropriations Subcommittee will be John Carter from Georgetown. And the chairman of Foreign Relations probably be Michael McCall from Austin. And those are powerful positions, and that they have a chance to serve a long period of time. Out of 435 members of Congress, there's not but about 35 that are contested races in November between Democrats and Republicans. So it means that the other 400, you've got to get elected in the primary. And if you're a Democrat, you've got to be careful you'll get beat from the left, so everybody moves to the left. And if you're a Republican, you've got to be careful you get beat from the right, and you got to move to the right. And the result is it's harder to compromise. When Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, totally different, conservative Republican, liberal Democrat, Tip got mad at Reagan one time and he said he's got terrible advisors. And Reagan hit him back real hard and he said he's ill-advised. You can say that about people that, and that night meet with them and work out a compromise. Pelosi called Trump an idiot and he called her a loon. It's hard to work that out at night, you know. I mean, it's difficult. And one of the things happened with if you take CNN and Fox and MSNBC, the more sensational things you get on to say, the more often you're going to get on. And so, and people see, and it's hard to work things out. There was a program, and I do these programs, and I'm sure there's builders in here that do, low-income housing tax credits. And that passed during Reagan's administration, and there was, Tip O'Neill, Jack Kemp, and Ronald Reagan were the ones that pushed that thing through. And it passed in the House 415 to 1. And it passed in the Senate 98 to nothing. And since then, Reagan started it. George H.W. Bush supported it. Bill Clinton supported it. George W. Bush supported it. Obama supported it. Trump supported it. And Biden supported it. And that was a program that's worked well, and was trying to get private sector involved in public housing. And it's helped the public, and it's worked. So you can do things and when I was in Congress, we tried to, on foreign policy, tried to work together. And that was very important. Another big change is journalism. Journalism is dead. And I'm sure I offended any reporter that happened to be here. And, you know, I'm just telling you, it's dead. Remember, you used to get up every morning and get the paper. You still do that, or you can get it online. But every politician went to see the editorial board of the Dallas Morning News, the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, the Beaumont Enterprise. They don't go see them anymore. They're insignificant. They're not players. And the press, here's how it's made up. It used to be they were slanted to the left, but now there's not a slant. I mean, they're just wholeheartedly. If you take newspapers, if you take Washington Post, LA Times, New York Times, you know, those and Associated Press, they're going to lean to the left. I mean, they're just biased when you read them. If you take TV, Fox is to the right and all the rest of them to the left. If you take talk radio, they're to the right. And you know, I try to listen to everybody and watch everybody from time to time just so I can figure out, you know, what I think's going on. But the real journalists are no longer involved, where they're trying to find out exactly what the story is, what's both sides saying. You know, you've got to be alert and to try to figure it out on your own, and that's sad that's happened. Newspapers don't have they just don't have, people don't read them like they used to. And but I remember, you know, 30 years ago, big thing, you wanted to get a newspaper. The reason newspapers were they'd give you an in-depth coverage. TV station, they'll give you a sound bite that'll last 30 seconds or 60 seconds. You know, and television changes. Used to, the TV stations had to have some programs that were for the public. And they'd do them on Sunday mornings before the preachers would get on. And they'd always interview the congressman and trying to be good with you. And a Lubbock station interviewed me one time. They recorded it, and they interviewed me, and the anchor was supposed to interview me, the weekend anchor, and there was a one-car rollover west of Shallowater, and he had to cover that. That tells you how important it was at my interview. And something happened to the backup anchor, and they had the weekend weather guy interview me. It's the dangest thing I've ever seen. He got there, and the red light came on the camera. He said, "Today we're honored to have Congressman Kent Hance," and told a little about me. And he said, "Congressman, glad to have you on the program." And I said, "I'm glad to be here." He said, "What's been going on?" That's his first question. That's kind of open-ended. So I've talked, and I'd pause to let him get in the conversation. And he'd just look at me like an owl, just blink. So finally I just stopped. And he came with his second zinger. What else been happening? And finally I got him on his third and last question. He said, "What's going to be coming up?" I thought to myself, he really shouldn't go into journalism. He needs to stay with the weather. Last time I checked on him, he was selling appliances in Abilene. Butler, you might want to go check on him, see how he's doing. Home building business, big business. And you have some ups and downs. Bob Perry always told me, he is a good friend. Bob Perry did something for me. I ran for governor, and Clayton Williams ran for governor, and Clady spent $23 million. I would have set a new record for a Republican. I spent 3.5. He spent 23. Hey, this is a retail state. If your competitor is selling houses and he has 7 ads on TV and you've got one, wonder who will sell the most houses. You know, you're going to sell more houses. And I got beat soundly, and Bob Perry came to see me the next day and brought me a check. When you lose, nobody gives you money. He brought me a check and said, "I appreciate all the service you've done in Washington and everything, and I know you'll have some." He gave me a $25,000 check. Well, I mean, that said a lot. But there was nothing, it wasn't going to help him or anything. He just appreciated me running, and I appreciated him. But you provide a lot of jobs, and that home building business is a competitive business. Talk about free enterprise, idiot. You got to get out there and you got to compete. And but when you finish a house, the joy that you get from seeing people move in, and some of them are custom homes, some of them are houses that are starter houses. And those are so important, and that it's important in the home building business. They usually are active in politics. They have enough members that are active, and there's always some that don't get active. But you should be very active in everything you do. I would be more than happy to take any questions that you might have about current politics or current, whatever.
Let's give a round of applause to Kent Hance. That was awesome. That was awesome. We got time, if you're okay, for a few questions. There's some mics out there. If you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll let you ask it. So while you're pondering, I have one. You've had the opportunity to serve at multiple levels: statewide office, Congress, Texas legislature. Talk about, we're heavily engaged, and you still are in the Texas legislature. Talk about the difference between the Texas legislature and Congress.
Texas legislature, it's not a political party battle like it is in Washington. In Washington, Obama couldn't get one Republican to support it, on a vote, and Trump couldn't get one Democrat. I mean, the bipartisan deal, they'll say it from time to time, but when it's tough, it's not. But in the legislature, you know each other. In the state Senate, I was one of 31. You know, I knew those people. I mean, I knew their children. And that I spoke at the wake for Swartz. You know, I'm a conservative Republican. He was a liberal Democrat. But we were still friends. And it wasn't personal. See, I never did take it personal if somebody would vote for or against my bill. They've got to deal with their constituents. I had a guy in Midland one time said, if you see Pelosi, slap her. Yeah, that'll help. You know, I mean, what are you thinking? You've got, anytime I need somebody's vote, I try to think, with their district, is there some way I can get their vote? I had to have Roy Harrington from Port Arthur, I had to have his vote one time, and there was a bill he had to do with regulating alligator hunting. And it was a big deal to him. I'm from Lubbock. Alligator hunting? I could vote any way I wanted to. And he needed my help. He later was a sponsor on the funding, for additional funding for the Texas Tech Medical School. There's some dead alligator out there probably mad about it, but so what? That alligator's going to eat somebody's kid or something. I can justify that vote. I dang sure can in Lubbock or Odessa. They'd say, that sounds like a good vote. But you use those. Charlie Wilson was good at it. He'd figure out, you know, the chip. LBJ was a master at it. Reagan, he took me to Camp David twice. And, boy, it's hard to vote against takes you to Camp David twice. And, but he needed someone in a leadership position in the House to help him, and that's one time it was in front page. He showed us landing, front page of the Washington Post. Phil Graham called me and he said, "What? You went to Camp David?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You took some people?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, why didn't you take me?" I said, "You're already committed to vote for my bill." And he said, "Well, I'll never commit early to you again." Graham turned 80 this week. He's doing good. He had a tough bout with cancer, and it's gone and it hadn't come back in 6 years. He has to have a checkup once a year. And Graham said, the week you have the checkup, you don't sleep real well until afterwards. But he gave a lot of service to this country.
Sure did. Any other questions? Come on, anybody? We got him here. I see one right over here, Mr. Carter. Jerry. Wait, hold up, Jerry. We got a mic.
Thank you, sir. We certainly enjoyed your stories this morning. But many of us in here have worked actively with, you know, in dealing with our leaders, whether that was community or state or national. And many times people come in when we go in, that people, we're against this, we're against this, we're against this, we're against this, we're against this. And sometimes people come in and say, here's what we're working on, and we know you're working on it. What's your opinion on that, and how can we help you to get to our resolution? How would that be a difference in your response to those two ways of dealing business?
Well, I think you can be effective either way. But look, if somebody came into my office and said, here's what we're trying to do, and we've heard that you're support, what can we do to help you? You know, and here's one other thing I always like. They come in and say, how can we help you on this bit? We want you to vote for it and everything, but can we answer any questions that'll make it easier for you to vote for it? I had a bill one time they were trying to pass that you could sell, this was in '75, that you could sell liquor in a grocery store, liquor and beer, and they were against it, you know. And in Lubbock, I was against it. Hell, they didn't sell it anywhere. You know, it was easy for me to take a position on that, and somebody came in kind of from the other side, and they said, this guy asked me, could you take a walk when that vote comes up? And I never took a walk. You know, sometimes they get somebody to take a walk and they wouldn't be there, and that would help the other position. But I think when you go in and you say, you're trying to identify with them, just like you said, I think it helps, it makes it easier. That would be my position, my recommendation. I think it's good point.
All right, one more question. We got to get this show going. Anybody else out there got one? Oh, yeah, that's a good question. From a lady over here that maybe used to work for you, Miss Uri.
Lorraine Uri was my office manager in D.C. She went up there as a teenager almost, and she became office manager for that. But this is a funny story. She was in charge of the mail, and I got a letter from her mother asking me to vote for some bill. And she told her, "Mother, people have to answer those letters." You know, she's having to answer the letter. And she said, "You don't need to do that, Mother. You can just call me." I always like that.
She that's funny. She has a question. How did you get into podcast deal?
I got into podcast. Skip Hollingsworth. Anybody know Skip Hollingsworth? He writes for the Texas Monthly. Somebody told me I ought to write a book of different stories. I'm going to. But he said, "Hance, you ought to do a podcast because your delivery and your voice and everything, the way your West Texas accent," he said, "you ought to do a podcast." And we did, and I've enjoyed it. I don't have much time. I record them on Saturday morning, and I have a saying of the day. One of my favorite sayings. I'll give you a couple of them. Trouble rides a fast horse. I'll tell you, it does. Boy, trouble comes, that horse will be going fast. You know that. And the other one I like, no matter how thin a coin may be, it will have two sides. You need to remember that in politics. Best people to understand things in politics usually are lawyers, because in their profession they say something and somebody says the opposite. The people that have to adjust to it and they have the hardest time are doctors and professors, because they're used to talking to a group and they tell them something and nobody questions them. So it's hard for them to come in the legislative process, but a lot of them adjust and do well. But the podcast comes out on Monday morning, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We have little snippets. That'll be some of the stories, like the Warren Burnett story about the enough ignorance in Odessa. When he said that, I was looking at the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Odessa, and I thought he was going to either die or go over there and choke poor old Warren to death. It was pretty funny. But that's how I got into it, and I appreciate you listening to it. And I'm a big fan of the home builders, and that I know what you go through. I went through it, some of the same things. But remember, there's money to be made on representing those subcontractors.
Let's give it up for Kent Hance.